So hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining me today. You're probably used to seeing me in the hosting role, which the lovely Bryony is doing today. So thank you very much, Bryony. John Putley is unfortunately away, so you stuck with me instead. And today I'm going to be doing a talk, Blood, Sweat and Tears, looking at Gloucestershire jobs in the past, which was a talk that we ran about a year or so ago. It was very popular, so we're running it again today. Let's get started. So first of all, ag labs, as they're often called on the census, agricultural labourers or farmhands. Until recently, ag labs were easily the most numerous occupation in the county. They worked for long hours for little pay, but often had rewards in the form of drink provided by the employer. This is haymaking on the Chase Farm, Charingworth, in around 1920. So most farmhands commenced employment at the age of 7 or 8 by bird scaring, stone picking, weeding, progressing onto the more skilled jobs as time passed and they matured. They had to be very versatile, and most were familiar with working animals. This is a cultivator driver and a farm boy harrowing with a team of oxen on the Bathurst estate, Cirencester. Despite the oxen, it was actually taken in about 1920. So agricultural machinery contractor. These pictures show James Blackwell's thresher and chaff cutter being towed by a traction engine. At the top, we'll see more of those later on. And W.S. Browning and Son of Stonehouse's traction engine powering a Marshall's threshing machine at the bottom. Agricultural contractors did not start to appear until the 1830s, with the introduction of movable horse-powered threshing machines, which were drawn from farm to farm. Horses were later replaced by steam-powered traction engines, supplying motive and operational power. And today, agricultural contracting is a massive business. So beekeeper, often thought of as the realm of country vicars and the retired, but this photograph shows students of Gloucestershire Cookery School with hives. The Gloucestershire Archives volunteer bee team, if you're not aware, we do have hives here at Gloucestershire Archives. They really like this photograph, but are very concerned by the lack of gloves and the dresses with open sleeves. Ouch. Blacksmiths. So most villages had a local blacksmith for making, repairing ironwork, and working as farriers. So that's somebody who specialises in horse hooфing. These images show at the top, the blacksmith Absalom Ford showing a horse at his forge in Chapel Street in Cam in 1910. And at the bottom, we can still see Bill Cleaton showing a horse at his forge in Clifford's Mesney near Newent, and that's about 1900. As industrialisation and the number of motor vehicles increased, blacksmithing virtually died out, with just a few farriers existing, although some smiths were able to transition into automobile mechanics. Today, blacksmithing has undergone a resurgence, with new smiths becoming artisans and artists who are as specialised in their skill as those in the past, but use and advance upon traditional techniques and ideas. We then have a brewer. Gloucestershire boasted numerous breweries. This is Cheltenham Original Brewers Company's new brewery in Cheltenham. This is the one that was rebuilt following a fire. Then we have builders, aka brickies. How many buildings in Gloucestershire have required the skills of the humble brickie? This photograph from the Citizen newspaper shows builders working on the Bledisloe wing, a new psychotherapy ward for Lydney Hospital, which was built opposite the hospital's main entrance during 1963, and it's still in use as an adult psychotherapy unit. So the builders obviously did a very good job. Bus driver / conductor. So this scene of Winchcomb's High Street outside the George Inn shows the queue for Trowton's omnibus, which ran between Cheltenham and Winchcombe. It was a Monday to Saturday service that left Winchcombe at 9:30 a.m. and departed from Cheltenham for the return at around 4 p.m. This is GWR bus number 16, a 20 horsepower Milnes Daimler standard double deck 018 16 RO bus, which was based at Stroud Station from January 1905. And as well as trains, the GWR ran an extensive system of road vehicles for carriage of both people and goods. However, by this date, both the places seen on the side of the bus, Brimscombe and Chalford, had railway halts. And the bus has the registration plate CO84, which indicates that it was actually registered at Exeter rather than in Gloucestershire. Canary Girl, lovely picture we have there of one of the Canary Girls. Canary Girls, women who worked in munitions manufacturing, try and say this right, actually we'll just go for TNT shells during the First World War. The nickname arose due to exposure to TNT. It was very toxic and could turn the skin an orange yellow, colour reminiscent of the plumage of a canary. And locally, women worked in National Fillings Factory number 5 at Quedgeley, a 380-acre site that began production in March 1917. At its peak, it employed roughly 6,300 local people, of which roughly 5,000 were women. And many workers arrived by train after the Midlands Railway built a new branch line and station platform. Next, we have the cheesemaker, as Monty Python said, blessed be the cheesemakers. This photograph of cheese making at Old Court Farm in Lower Stone was taken in 1973 by local photographer P. Turner. It shows the use of the curd breaker and curd tub, while in the background can be seen a cheese press and some cheese moulds. And traditionally, Gloucester cheeses were only made with the milk of Gloucester cattle. Next, we have a chauffeur. This is Mr. Boland in a Straker Squire car in 1907 around Stroud. Sadly, we know nothing else, and the car can't be identified as the licence plate isn't visible. This, however, is the chauffeur of Charles Alfred Appley, the wealthy woolen manufacturer of Rodborough Court in 1906, and his master's AD234 20 horsepower Coventry Climax 4-seater side entrance tonneau. Chauffeurs were typically well dressed, clean cuts, and in uniform, often very much a status symbol. If you note on the picture, the driver's caps and classic driving gauntlets, which are fantastic. The term chauffeur comes from the French term for stoker, because the earliest automobiles were steam powered and required the driver to stoke the engine. Next, we have a coachman. This is a stagecoach outside the White Hart Inn in Winchcombe in around 1870, well into the twilight years of coach travel. It's probably a local coach for the railway didn't reach Winchcombe until 1906, when the GWR's Honeybourne line arrived. And the passengers that we can see on the roof are outside passengers. This was much cheaper than sitting on the inside, but it did expose the traveller to the full force of the weather. Occasionally, passengers actually froze to death in the winter, and if you fell off, it was hard luck. I've got to say, it doesn't look terribly safe to me. Most stagecoaches only travelled at around 5 to 8 miles per hour, and the average daily mileage covered being only around 60 to 70 miles. A coppicing is a traditional way of woodland management which relies on the ability of many trees to regrow from their stump if cut down. In a coppiced wood, known as a copse, young trees are repeatedly cut down to near ground level, allowing new growth that after a number of years can be harvested. And coppicing provided fence staves, poles, firewood, typically sold in bundles or faggots, lathes, which we use for wattle, hurdles, pegs, thatching spars, tool handles, charcoal, besom brooms, and hop poles. And this page from the Batsford Estate accounts for 1770 shows John Phillips being paid 10 shillings for half a day's coppicing, which was 5 times that of a labourer. We have a district nurse. This is Nurse Wolfe in Gotherington on a donkey cart about to start her rounds. That's in around 1895. A note on the back of the photograph states that her salary was £35 per annum. We have a docker built to handle global maritime trade, bound to from the Midlands and also timber from the Baltic. Gloucester docks were nationally important. This is a Midland Railway horse team hauling a large wagon around 1887 with Philpotts and Co. corn merchants warehouse in the background. Around the port, there were extensive rail links of the GWR and Midland Railways, but inside the port, sharp corners around the quayside warehouses required turntables, so steam locomotives couldn't be used. So instead, horses were utilised. And there are corn porters shifting sacks. These are corn porters shifting sacks of corn or flour to or from Healings and Son, probably at their mill at Tewkesbury, which is still there if you've ever been to Tewkesbury. Healings flour mill was considered to be the largest, most advanced flour mill in the country, capable of producing 25 sacks of flour an hour. Next, we have, of course, elvermen. Elvers or glass eels are young eels that were traditionally caught and consumed in Gloucestershire as a cheap dish. They were fished for at night on spring tides with a lamp to draw them to the elver net. And the elver net is very distinctive, as you can see in the pictures. Certainly living outside Tewkesbury, I still see the odd person with one of those. So presumably catching elvers. They were traditionally sold alive by the pint and fried with bacon, and today they're considered a delicacy and cost around £500 per pound. Environmental changes and overfishing have reduced eel populations to the point where they are now critically endangered. Illegal elvering is still rife and eel smugglers can earn millions of pounds. You can actually buy a sort of reproduction of elvers, which I think is made in China, but I've never tried it. Engine driver. It was once said that boys, when boys grew up, they wanted to be engine drivers. This is the driver of the Gloucester Railway Carriage and Wagon Company's works, the 040 locomotive Siam, which was used for shunting in and around the wagon works. This next one is somewhat different and shows an engine driver of a BR Standard 2MT 260 casually leaning out of the cab at a speed that Siam's driver could only dream of. And taken in 1965, the locomotive is hauling a goods train bound for Nailsworth and is crossing over the Stroudwater Canal at Ryford. Engineer, machinist. This is Carlton Green, working in the light machine shop, Fielding and Platt from 1972 until 1981. He was born in Jamaica in 1936, came to the UK when he was 12, and after attending Gloucester Technical College, he became a skilled operator at Th&J Daniels in Stroud. He started working at Fielding and Platt in 1972, operating all manner of highly specialist machinery. And this photograph, taken from a company promotional catalogue, shows Carlton at work on a Ward 7 capstan lathe, a highly specialist machine which could be manually set up for producing large quantities of pieces. We next have a fairgrounds worker. We have children looking on as Gloucester Park's annual fun fair takes shape in 1960. Men are working on the waltzer ride and the big wheel is in the background. You can see that probably in the process of either putting it up or taking it down. You can see the wheel in the background isn't intact yet. A fiddler. This lovely picture is of a village church fiddler, Johnny Hopkins of Salperton, and he was photographed in around 1944. Although churches were dominated by organs, some also utilised fiddlers and other musicians. And this photograph comes from Gloucestershire Countryside, a monthly magazine which was similar to Cotswold Life today. Although described as a church fiddler, it's highly likely that Johnny would happily perform in other locations, notably local pubs. So next on to firemen. It wasn't until the late 1800s, early 1900s that municipal fire brigades began to become common. This is the Minchinhampton fire engine taken around 1900. The town actually bought its first engine in 1755, although the first official fire brigade wasn't formed until 1864. This is Stroud Urban District Council's fire engine, and officers taken in 1910 with their Merryweather and Sons horse-drawn double vertical boiler engine. And if you look closely at the picture, just next to the gentleman on the left, you'll see a little X that's been drawn in next to him. And on the reverse of this photograph, written to a sister, it says, "I put a cross by the one I'm going to meet tonight." Fishermen, numerous different types of fishing were carried out on the River Severn. To the right is an eel fisherman with a fyke or eel basket taken aptly in 1932. The scene below shows 4 fishermen hauling in a seine net which has been set by a Severn punt, which you can just see the edge of on the bottom right. Free miners. Mining in the Forest of Dean has gone on since prehistoric times, when ochre, iron, and even coal mining being well established by the time of Roman occupation in the area. Edward I, 1272 to 1307, granted forest miners their free status, and this birthright is available to any man or woman born and living within the hundreds of St Bravils, aged 21 or over, and who have worked a year and a day in a coal or iron mine or stone quarry. And to open a personal mine or gale, the mine must apply to the forest gaveller, the official who represents the Crown. Known as drift mines, most forest mines are actually only worked by 1 or 2 miners. A flyman. So a fly was a light horse public passenger vehicle akin to a hansom cab or modern taxi. They were licensed by the local authorities more or less the same way. And this is an application to Cheltenham Borough Council by William Haynes for a licence to be a flyman, so he could earn money to support his 5 children after their mother had died. Next, we have a gardener. Big houses usually had big gardens and required lots of attention. This is the lawn at the old rectory in Cannonbourne near Western Sub Edge. Mowing grass was made a whole lot easier with the introduction of motor mowers. This is a Ransom's 12 Mark II with a Villiers Mark V 269cc 2-stroke engine. We have a jailer. The distinguishes nature of the role of jailer, and if you look down the right-hand side, it's spelt jailer with a Jailor here, or turnkey, is shown to good effect well in this front piece for a 1792 pamphlet entitled Gloucester Bastille. A goat herd, so not as common as in Austria, but goat herd was once a role in Gloucestershire's past. These photographs showing a Toggenburg and an Anglo-Nubian were perhaps taken prior to a local agricultural show in 1910. And the photographer was probably William Dennis Moss, who ran a photography business in Castle Street, Cirencester in around 1890. This lovely little detail is from one of the maps that we have here at Gloucestershire Archives, and it shows a gibbet, a gallows-like structure used to hang an iron cage containing the body of an executed criminal. These were usually set up close to where the crime took place, and the locality often became linked, for example, Hangman's Stone. Gibbeting would be carried out by the hangman with his assistants, and the criminal's body would be left to rot until the cage was required again. And they often became tourist attractions and sources of souvenirs. Next, we have a harbour master. This is the Sharpness harbour master and family by their home on the quayside. Harbour masters enforce the regulations of the harbour or port in order to ensure the safe navigation, security of the harbour and correct operation of port facilities. They also managed navigational aids, inspected vessels, and oversaw pilotage services. Most also had the legal power to detain, caution, and arrest persons committing an offence within the port. And today, this building is the headquarters of the Severn Area Rescue Association. Next, we have a hedger. Hedge laying is a country craft which has been practiced for hundreds of years and was especially important after the Enclosure Acts began dividing up the countryside. This image is from an estate memoranda book of James Agg relating to hedges being laid at the Lug on his Hewlett's estate in Cheltenham, 1798. Today, hedgerows define our countryside and are vitally important for wildlife as a refuge, a source of food, and as corridors along which they can move through the landscape. Hedge laying declined after World War II due to factors such as availability and cost of labour, the introduction of hedge flail machines for cutting hedge, and cheap wire fencing. Today, it's making a comeback, but it is expensive because it requires a skilled craftsperson to do it. We have a horse breeder here with so many horses required for agricultural work. Horse breeding was big business, and this is a photograph of a stallion at the accurately named stud farm in Blaisdon in around 1900. Horseman, this is Edward John Smith, known as Ted, with 2 farm horses. And Ted worked at Colham End Farm on Church Road in Leckhampton all his life, only retiring in 1939 at the age of 80. And this photograph was taken to mark his diamond wedding in 1941, when he went back to the farm to see old friends. A lave netter. Lave netting was a technique used to catch salmon and other fish on the lower parts of the Severn estuary. The fishermen would venture out on an ebbing tide and dip the lave net into channels in the rock and hope salmon would be caught. It required a huge amount of local knowledge, and only one group, the Black Rock Lave Netters, is in existence today, although they've been banned from fishing by the Environment Agency. Level crossing keeper. Crossing keepers were railway staff who looked after a level crossing. This is Barton Gates crossing in Gloucester, which was one of the busiest in the county. And crossing keepers were responsible for controlling the movement of crossing gates that kept trains moving through on time, opening the gates to let other users cross the tracks only when it was safe for them to do so. And they also maintained their gates and reported defects. Most had keepers' cabins for weather protection. And manual crossings began to be replaced by automated gates barriers in the 1970s. Although most level crossings are now automated, St Mary's Crossing at Brimscombe is a manually operated survivor. It is a GWR style using an interlock device that only releases the brass keys to open the gates when there isn't a train coming. Otherwise, the 2 keys are held in devices in a white box at the foot of the keeper's cabin. We have a milkmaid. Milkmaids, also known as dairymaids, were in high demand in the Vale of Gloucester. They were responsible for milking cows and for making cheese and other dairy products before the industrialisation of agriculture. The skills and knowledge of dairying passed down through generations of women who often developed closely guarded family-based recipes and techniques. The word dairy derives from the Old English word female servant, but in fact these women were essential economic drivers of farm profitability and sustainability. This photograph, which has the look of a posed shot, you can see there's no grub given to the cow to keep them still, was taken somewhere around Slimbridge Cornwall, Purton or Gossington in the early 1900s. A metal bucket was used to catch the milk, and this can be seen between the milkmaid's feet. Although the Vale was dominated by Gloucester cattle, the cow here is a roan shorthorn, a breed that originated in the northeast of England in the late 1700s. We have a mobile caterer. Nowadays, most road labourers have a mobile food van and offer numerous food types, but mobile caterers have actually been around for many years. This is a horse-drawn fish and chip van in the Cirencester area, possibly the local carnival in the 1920s. And you can see smoke and steam emanating from the metal chimney just to the rear of the van, so cooking was clearly underway. Most vans like these used a coal-fired range, but the main drawback was that it took about an hour for the fire to fully heat the oil, and then it had to be continually stoked to retain a level temperature. A mole catcher. Moles have always been considered a nuisance to lawns, sports fields, gardens, and molehills can trip up racehorses and cattle. Mole tunnelling can damage crops, and stones thrown up by moles can damage farm machinery. Mole catching was a lucrative business. This is a page from the Batsford estate accounts for 1770, which show mole catcher Edward Grimmett receiving 3 shillings for a half day's work. An average labourer's daily pay at the time was £1. Clay or wooden pots to drown moles were traditional, but by the 1700s, steel plunger traps, scissor traps, spring traps, and even mole guns were developed. Later worms were dipped in strychnine, and that was used, but it meant that mole catchers wouldn't be able to display their kills on a fence, which was a traditional way of proving their worth. The Tudors even used explosives. They would fill an empty hazelnut shell with gunpowder and light the fuse, then push it into the mole tunnel, amazingly. Musicians. This is the Mick Collins Band. They were a semi-professional beatnik group on Gloucestershire's lively music scene. They're pictured here in December 1962. They wore blue striped sweaters, matching shirts and black trousers. And the 4 band members were vocalist, guitarist Rod Ricky Welsh, he was a librarian, the drummer Michael Collins, he was from the Foreign Office, a guitarist David Vick, who was a farmer's son, and on bass we have Hugh Worsnip, who was a journalist / TV presenter. It's quite a mixed bunch there. The term navvy was coined in the late 1700s when numerous canals known as navigations were being built, and it came to refer to the men who built them. The name often later transferred to those building the railway network, and despite public opinion, the great majority were English, with only about 30% being Irish. The work was long, hard and dangerous, as this 1849 extract from the Church and Burial Register recounting the burial of a young navvy shows. And if you could just see there, September the 16th, a lad, name unknown, at Churcham graveyard in the churchyard near the first yew tree, southeast corner of the churchyard, killed in the Hynham Culling or Downs bridge of the Great Western Railway when it was made new. The burial took place on Sunday evening when about 100 of his mates attended the funeral, dressed in white, I think it's the slops and trousers, and the 12 bearers wore each a white rosette on his left breast, and the rest came 2 and 2, and it was a beautiful sight. He was supposed to be about 15 years of age, name unknown, and also his birthplace. Very sad. Navvies didn't just shift earth. This shows them building the Capel Mill viaduct, which carries the GWR's Golden Valley line into Stroud from the west. It was built in 1868 to replace an earlier timber viaduct built in 1840, and was made up of 22 spans spanning the river frame and the Thames and the Severn Canal. Since it was built, the land around it has been built up, so although it looks smaller, it is still an amazing feat of engineering, and notes the total lack of safety equipment. Police officer. This is Police Sergeant William Morris and two colleagues outside Lydney Police Station, circa 1895. Sergeant Morris died on the 10th of November 1895 after he and PC Cornelius Harding were involved in a fight at Viney Hill with a party of drunken forest colliers from Whitecroft and Pillowell. The men were both struck down by stones, and although Harding regained consciousness, sadly Morris died after sustaining a fractured skull and a broken neck. Three young colliers were later arrested and convicted of manslaughter. Sergeant Morris was 32 years old and had served for over 10 years in the force. He left a widow and three young children. In the 194 years of service, 20 Gloucestershire police officers have died whilst on duty. Next, we have a postman. This is a postie delivering mail in the Stroud area around 1900. Note the medals on the recipient's chest. The Royal Mail began in 1519 when Henry VIII established a Master of the Post to carry royal communications. And then in 1635, Charles I made it available to the public, with postage being paid by the recipient. At the Restoration, it was renamed the General Post Office, the GPO, under a Postmaster General, becoming known as the Royal Mail because it used the distribution system for royal and government documents. It remained as the GPO until 1969, when it was denationalised and its assets transferred to the Post Office, changing from a Department of State to a statutory corporation. A poultry keeper. Although chickens and ducks were the most common form of poultry, the market for geese and turkeys was substantial. This photograph of a woman feeding turkeys was taken in the farmyard of Charingworth Chase Farm at Charingworth sometime between 1903 and 1932. Geese and turkeys were raised for the Christmas feed market, and the straw rick in the background here and the size of the birds suggests this photograph was probably taken sometime in September or October. Quarrymen. There are quarries in every part of Gloucester, Forest Vale and Cotswold Hills. Most were small affairs worked by just one or two men, visible today as grassed over hummocks or hollows and fields, though others were larger and more commercial. This is thought to be a quarry near Minchinhampton, taken around 1900, with the men working the great oolite group of limestones. Railway porter, looking extremely dapper. This is George Harris, a porter on the Great Western Railway at Cheltenham. It comes from one of the photograph albums of Reverend Edward Blackwell of Amberley, a photography buff who took many images of Amberley Church, local people, visitors, and the churchyards in the 1860s and 1870s. If you haven't seen that collection, it's fantastic. Although George lived in Cheltenham, he had been born in Amberley in 1831, and this may have been taken on the occasion of the baptism of his son William, which took place at Amberley on the 21st of May 1865, with Reverend Blackwell as the officiating minister. Shepherd. The Cotswolds have been associated with sheep since Roman times and have a breed named after them, the Cotswold Lion. There are also sheep gargoyles and grotesques on local churches, notably at Bybury and Compton Abdale. The money from wool made the area extremely wealthy and left us with the legacy of wool churches, most notably at Northleach, Fairford and Cirencester. Here we have a sheep shearer. Shearing is said to be one of the oldest occupations, as people needed the fibres to make garments. Scissor-like blades were the most common form of shearing tool until the early 1880s, when hand-cranked clippers were introduced. This shows the Excel sisters, who sheared 388 sheep at Heath Hill Farm near Wick in the 1920s. Forest ship badgers. The running of sheep through the Forest of Dean is a tradition dating back to the Forest Charter of 1217, allowing freeborn foresters living in the forest the freedom to collect wood for fuel and the right to graze livestock, providing that they were marked. Forest sheep are known as haunted. What this means is that they were settled within a certain heft, small local area for their lives, and only rarely strayed, apparently, which allows commoners to graze their sheep without the need for fences. As lambs learnt their heft from their mothers, continuity of generations of sheep is therefore extremely important. A Sawyer. The vestry records for the parish of Micheldean are very detailed, and they contain several references to sawyers being paid to cut timber. In this extract, John Collins was paid for sawing on 3 occasions, as well as for other work, and you can just see that in about the middle of the list. Shopkeeper. At one time, every hamlet and village had a shop of some kind, while towns had more. This is the shop front of T&H Wilkins, bakers and grocers of Bourton-on-the-Water, taken in 1896, with H.B. and C.V. Wilkins, sons of the founder, standing in the shop door. This is the shop front of one of the Gloucester co-ops. The cooperative societies began around 1844 and developed over the years from the merger of wholesale societies and independent retail societies. The idea was to offer cheaper food to workers who became members and who would get a share of the profits. The Gloucester Cooperative Society, formed in 1861, followed by Keynes Cross and Ebley in 1868, Stroud in 1886, Cinderford in 1889, and Lydney in 1897. Every village once had its own shop. This is the Sapperton village shop. The man by the door is presumably the shop owner. The advertising signs by the window, Biotis and Cocoa. I've not been able to find anything about this company, unfortunately. Steeplejack. This photo shows the removal of the top of St John's church spire in 1910. The work and repairs were carried out by W. Larkin's Steeplejack, and just looking at this picture makes me feel a bit weird. Yeah, not much there on health and safety. Surveyor. This lovely little detail that you can see there is from a map that we have at the archives of the Manor of Long Newton from 1748. I like to see it as one of the first selfies because it's a self-portrait of surveyor Stephen Jeffreys of Minchinhampton, age 68. Surveyors use theodolites, as we can see here, poles, survey measuring chains to record measurements in rough field books, which was then translated using geometry to draw up maps. It's a very complicated, time-consuming occupation, but it was critical for recording land ownership, property and estates. A surveyor and assistants undertaking enclosure survey using poles. The surveyor is third from the left, getting his gopher to move a pole to make a straight line with the pole in the background. The man on the left is either a shepherd, because you can see he has a crook there, and also note the dog, or possibly he is the landowner. The curve at the top of the image with the legend J.B. Maxwell Surveyor above it is actually drawing of a measuring chain. Thatching was much more common in the Vale of Gloucester, as in the Cotswold and Dean. Stone slates were used for roofing, whereas in the Vale there were ample supplies of reed and straw for thatching. This photo shows Frampton-on-Severn's Tithe Barn in the first stage of the process of thatching, where they're removing the old thatch. And judging from the greenery growing on this cottage in Sharpness, it could clearly do with being rethatched. Here we have a tram driver. This photograph shows an unusual Gloucester Corporation tram car at the top of Wotton Pitch in Gloucester. It was used to carry construction materials to Brockworth for the construction of Brockworth Aerodrome. The tram was nicknamed Black Maria, as some of its windows have been covered by wooden sheets. Next, we have a test pilot. Philip Edward Gerald, known as Jerry Sayer, was born at Colchester on the 2nd of February 1905 and joined the RAF in June 1924, being promoted to flying officer on the 30th of March 1926. He was referred to the RAF Reserve in 1929 and joined the Hawker Aircraft Company as a test pilot when they took over the Gloucester Aircraft Company in November 1934. He was appointed Gloucester's chief test pilot. He flew numerous aircraft types and made the first official flight of Gloucester Whittle, the first British jet prototype, on the 15th of May 1941. He also flew the first unofficial flight when, while on high-speed taxiing runs at Brockworth, the E-28 accidentally became airborne. He was killed in a flying accident in October 1942 while flying a Hawker Typhoon over the Druridge Bay gunnery range. Travelling showman. This photograph shows an amazing traction engine, the Duchess of Worcester, at the Winchcombe Mop Fair in around 1905, with the owner, Mr. Peters, and other onlookers. The Duchess was a Charles Burrell and Son Showman's Road locomotive with the number 2350. These traction engines were used for travelling showmen to tow and then operate fairground rides such as the roundabouts, carousels, dodgems, and others. Duchess drew and powered F. Peters and Son galloping horses carousel. The name is just visible on the canopy. And this wonderful picture, although the Duchess is now gone, her sister, the 2351 Ephraim, is still active. And this is her at the Gloucestershire Steam Extravaganza in Kemble in 2008. Water carrier. This photograph was taken around 1900 in Aldsworth, and shows the local water carrier making a delivery. Up until well into the 20th century, mains piped water was rare in rural communities, and collecting water was a continual and irksome chore. While most villages had a communal pump, these were not always convenient. The Aldsworth pump, still in situ, is on the other side of the village, so about a quarter of a mile away. And while some households had private wells, which unfortunately often dried up in the summer, or used water from nearby springs or rainwater, others had to rely on portable water from a local carrier. Watermen. Watermen have been working the rivers of Gloucestershire for hundreds of years. This shows just two examples, a private coal barge on the Stroudwater Canal and the Winnie H, one of John Harker's tanker barge in the canal by Monk Meadow Dock in Gloucester. This wonderful little detail is of a highwayman. This appears on the map of Shipton that we have here at the archives. Then we have the Green Cross Codeman. In 1978, David Prowse, the actor and Green Cross Codeman, visited Whaddon Junior School. The Green Cross Code was a road safety campaign that ran from 1971 to 1990, following on from the Tufty Club. By this time, Prowse had already portrayed Darth Vader in Star Wars, although all his lines were voiced over by James Earl Jones because Prowse's West Country accent was too strong. On set, he received the affectionate nickname Darth Farmer. Crash test dummy. Sadly, we don't know much about this photograph, apart from the fact that it looks extremely painful. It comes from the Gloucester Citizen newspaper and shows the testing of a road transport seatbelt in around 1976. So that brings us to the end. Just to say that if you've got any questions in the chat facility in a moment, we're going to do our best to answer them. If you do think of any other questions later on, please do email us at archives@gloucestershire.gov.uk. If you don't remember that, you'll find that on our website. Finally, our next event at the Heritage Hub is Want a Career or Role in Heritage on Saturday, the 1st of June. That's taking place from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The event's all about career or volunteering roles in heritage. We've got loads and loads of representatives from archives, libraries, archaeology, museums, other heritage organisations. So if you're interested in getting involved in heritage, this is the perfect opportunity for you. Also, if you have any young people who would perhaps like to go into heritage as a career, please do bring them along. This is a great opportunity. There's also going to be talks. There are 2 talks. The keynote speakers are very own Heather Forbes, who is head of the archives. She's going to be talking about her career and things she's learned at 11 a.m. We also have Mark Horton, who you might recognise from various TV programmes. You're very interested in history, and he's going to also be giving a talk at 1 p.m. These talks do tend to be oversubscribed, so if you do want to come along, I'd really recommend that you book those up as soon as possible. You can do that on our website, and there'll also be have a go at opportunities and demonstrations, films behind the scenes, tours of Gloucestershire archives. So please do come along. That would be fantastic. Our next Secrets Revealed online talk will soon be advertised on the What's On page. Please do come along to that. You'll be delighted to know that John Putley will be back for that. And on that note, I'm going to pass back to Bryony. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. That was fascinating. There currently aren't any questions in the chat, so I think we'll probably leave it there unless anyone has anything they want to type in urgently. Otherwise, feel free to email us, and as Gemma said, we'll get back to you afterwards. Thank you, everyone coming along. Please do come to the next one, and thank you again, Gemma.